Hello, zombie fans. This is Reanimated, episode 121. I'm Stuart, and I am in California. And in New York is the inescapable AJ Conrad. Hello.
Hello.
What's happening?
Bonjour. Nothing much, Getting ready
Just,
for the Thanksgiving, the giving of thanks.
oh man, so many things to give thanks for,
Mm,
uh, and so much to eat.
there's a lot to eat.
We've got some tasty fare coming up now in Reanimated as we are diving into, you like that, diving into Walking Dead season 5. You might say, "Hey, Reanimated, what are you talking about? It's season 7, Walking Dead." Well, for us, it's season 5 because it takes us a long ass time to review these seasons, and then we like to break it up with some other stuff like tasty treats like Busan and Freaks of Nature, which you heard recently.
Right.
So, here we go. We also have a couple of news tasty treats. Speaking of, and an amuse bouche from Japan. What do you think of this crazy stuff, AJ?
I have to admit, when I saw it a couple times and then you sent it to me and I watched it again, I'm not really sure what's going on, but it's like probably one of those crazy things that could only come from Japan. And what kind of an event was this exactly?
I think this was just the opening of a normal game of baseball in Japan.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was, I don't know. I thought maybe it was for Halloween or something like that. But in any case, they have these like weird, they're sort of playing out. They have actors on the field that are like, one is supposed to be from The Grudge, I think, or The Ring, or
Mm-hmm.
both. And they're doing some zombie moves. They're pitching pretty well. Um, you kind of have to watch it to understand what we're talking about. But hey, I was delighted to see that this kind of innovation is going on.
So it's apparently a promotional stunt for a movie that's coming out. But you've got a kid in his underwear with white makeup. You've got a zombie lady with a baseball bat, and the chick who climbs out of the well in the ring.
Yep.
And they do some weird posturing and maneuvering, and then eventually throw out a decent pitch, and she hits it. It's a line drive.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty impressive considering that the zombie lady's like kind of all twitchy and
Torquey. Yep.
yeah. So anyway, it's a cool video. It's going to be in the show notes, or you can just Google uh I don't know, zombies Japan baseball, and you'll probably get it.
Right. And in other news, we just mentioned, Train to Busan, and basically these kinds of local films have been just doing incredibly well for the Korean box office. So that's pretty cool if you consider that, basically these are all homegrown grown films. And this is over 50% of the box office revenue, which is fantastic. So that's definitely new, I think, from what I understand.
Well,
Although,
definitely new was Train to Busan got the single day highest gross ever, nine
right,
point nine million dollars, with
right.
more than 1.3 million people went to see that movie on one day in Korea, in South Korea. So that's pretty awesome.
Right, and that's not even accounting for how it did worldwide, which it did incredibly well. Like when it made its way over here. So
Mm.
I did see though. I saw initially that they were talking immediately about doing a Train to Busan 2, but then they walked that back, and comments from the director basically didn't it doesn't necessarily say they're not, but says that there's not an immediate plan, and if they could do it, they're not sure when. So I thought that was interesting that there was sort of conflicting press going around about that. So
Mm.
we'll see what happens. I'm assuming because initially I think they were saying that the little girl in the film, Sue, would end up being as part of the sequel, but then that is apparently not true yet. So we'll keep an eye on that. But I hope they do something else with it. It was kind of cool.
I could live without a sequel. It was so good by itself. I wouldn't want the franchise, the brand to get. That's kind of defensive, but I don't really
Oh,
see where that story would go. You know,
not necessarily a sequel, but something maybe in the same universe or something. I don't know. I'd be happy to see something else with that director. I thought he did a great job.
true, but as we've also said, like with the people who made Cargo and then making the full length feature film, it'd be nice to see them stretch their legs and do something a little different. It
True.
would be awesome if it was still horror, but they did such a good job with the zombies in that movie.
They did.
That Yeah, I would like to see another zombie thing from them. Maybe if the zombies were a little easier to kill, because it's.
Perhaps.
But hey, that's a nitpick.
And
But yeah, that is interesting though to hear that the directors and like promotional people are like, we made so much money, let's make more of that money. So we'll have to see where they end up
well, there
landing
was
on.
even weird things about Edgar Wright saying somehow he wanted to have a piece of that action, and I don't even know if that was true or not. I think that they were all just like getting really excited because this made so much money. So we'll see what happens with it. But lastly, you found a long article, but an interesting article about the world of The Walking Dead, what they get wrong and what they get right.
Well, it's really it's more all zombies rather than just Walking Dead. But
Right.
it's what's interesting. The first part of this article is from SOFREP, which is a special operations report. It's a news website for people, in theory, people who are in the special operations world. But obviously, they're writing an article about zombies, so it's also pop culture fare. The beginning of this article attributes modern day popular zombie fare to 2004 Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, which I feel like you and I have talked about as being
Yeah.
seminal for us too in our experience. Even though we were probably fans of the genre before that, I think that kind of really was a catalyst. So I think it's interesting that someone who doesn't write about zombies but writes about military stuff also attributes that. It's just, to me, it was notable that they said the 2004 Dawn of the Dead was like kind of a launching pad for things like Walking Dead and modern day zombie popularity.
Yep.
However, the article goes into, it's kind of a listicle. The article is called "What Everyone Gets Wrong About a Zombie Apocalypse and Why It Could Kill You in Real Life," and they start off by saying that the government has been using this, as we've talked about on this podcast many times, as a learning tool that's kind of fictional. So he also name drops the CDC and their zombie website, which we've talked about, and then he goes into a what not to do because why it would kill you listicle element, which is very interesting. So first thing he says is, do not go to Walmart or your local gun store because they will be hotbeds of looter slash undead activity. And his reasoning is, hey, you should really just own a gun already, uh, which I enjoy.
Solid idea.
And he's like, also, you should just own a gun and have some non-perishables in your basement so you can wait until the Walmarts have all finished burning down because they're just going to be giant battlefields.
I mean, if you think Black Friday is crazy,
Right,
I mean, humans get stupid about sales. Like, what's going to happen if actual life is on the line? And I've talked about this before. Here in New York, there's even the hint of a storm or whatever, and people immediately go crazy and go and like stock up on like 10 chickens and bread and milk and all sorts of crazy stuff. And
Yep.
then, the stores are empty. And that's like, these are things that hopefully will pass in a few days as opposed to being an actual, um, you know, like I'm not saying a blizzard is an emergency, but you're here in New York, so there is a little bit more access than it would be in like a rural area. Like where I grew up, it was so rural that we actually did have a ton of non-perishables and stuff just on hand because there was a good chance that if things went wrong with the weather, you wouldn't actually be able to drive out of there for a while. So
Right, right.
it's a little different here, but people react in the same crazy way. So think about what would happen if it was an actual situation like this. I think this guy's correct.
This is why, yeah, the official Reanimated stance, I think, is not. We don't think we have a stance on gun ownership, but our stance is definitely have a supply of food
Yeah,
and water in your house. That's just good. That's just good
that's good
emergency
sense.
planning. His next issue is with shooting your way out of trouble. Why you shouldn't be shooting all the time is essentially just because ammunition is going to be very scarce, and so he makes a point about survival for special operators and the SEER principles: survival, escape, resistance, and evade. No, wait, survival, evasion. No, survival, escape, resistance, and evasion. With shooting your way out of problems is not like really on that list, except in a real pinch. So ammunition would be extremely scarce. We don't really run into that problem, especially in a long-lasting show like The Walking Dead. They never seem to have a real problem with ammunition, which is troubling to say the least.
Right. And then there's the other thing that you and I have brought up many, many times is that shooting makes a lot of noise. So unless you have a silencer or something like that, you might be attracting more, either more walkers or more people who want to come and take your stuff from you. So
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
the other part.
And finally, his last issue is with aiming for the head. Again, under duress, shooting is difficult. He says that you'd probably miss more often than not if you're trying to make those shots. And he makes a very interesting point, which is that you should, if two shots of the chest don't put someone down, apparently this is like a very common practice for special operations. They'll go for a headshot or a pelvis shot, and he actually recommends in this article shooting at the pelvis because it'll essentially immobilize a person. I'm not sure if it would immobilize a zombie, but we've seen, at least in the canon, when they break their backs, they can't walk. If
Right.
they were to shatter their pelvis because there's a 9 millimeter round going through it and breaking all those bones, there's a good chance that they would be restricted to crawling instead of running after you. So if you can't make the headshot, the pelvis is a much bigger target than the head, is kind of the point.
Yeah, but that is all interesting points and good things to keep in mind when we go into this next season, especially this episode. So we're going to hop in to season 5 of The Walking Dead. And the first episode, we're going to go through episodes 1 through 3. I'm behind this decision after watching episodes 1 through 3. Obviously, the first, No Sanctuary, I think we'll have a lot to talk about. The other two, I don't have quite as much to say, but we can see how it goes. But No Sanctuary, solid season opener for this season.
It was a big cliffhanger the season before with them getting locked in the train car after getting to Terminus.
Right.
So not unlike the beginning of season 7 that we just had here in the real world, it had a lot to live up to.
And I should mention that this was written by Scott Gimple, who was the showrunner, and it was directed by Greg Nicotero. So
kind of
you
the
kind of knew
superstars.
you kind of knew it was going to be good, or at least you were hoping it was going to be good.
Right. Which makes it all the more surprising that Kirkman wrote the second one that we're going to talk about. But yeah.
Yes, that's true.
Let's go through it. We've got the cold open is kind of interesting. It's a retrospective from it's a flashback from the perspective of the termites,
Right.
the Terminutians, showing that they are kind of in a tight spot
Yep.
themselves. They are actually in it's very there's a lot of symmetry here because they are in the train car.
Yep.
And they are prisoners, and they're like, what have we done? Why do we put up those signs? What do we think was going to happen? Et cetera, et cetera. They're kind of expecting you to remember who these people are in a way that I think is a little unrealistic, except
Right.
on going back and watching it again later.
Yeah, well, they know superfans would probably do that. But
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
But we see Mary, Gareth, and...
Tasha Yar.
Yep, Tasha Yar.
Tasha Yar, Gareth.
Which is the only way I can think of her, and it's
Yeah,
kind
of
of
course.
weird. Anyway,
Of course.
and then Alex, and they're
Right.
all, they're basically being like, I can't believe that this is happening to us. And then you see the switch where where they become what we see them as when Rick's group comes across them, which is these kind of crazy ass cannibals.
Cold-blooded. Yeah, they're just like whinging, whining, pathetic people in this intro. So it is interesting. Then it's after the credits, it switches to modern to what's happening now inside that same train car, as far as we know, and people are like, I don't know, wrapping their hands around things and making weapons, and
Yep.
they're ready to bum rush the door when it opens.
Right, and all their prep is for naught because they get tear gassed.
I think it's a flashbang grenade, actually.
Okay.
Although it might be it doesn't look like a flashbang. I don't know exactly what flashbangs
They're
look like.
coughing a lot. I don't know. It
There's
could
a
be either. It
big
doesn't
there's an
matter.
explosion. It's very unlikely that these people have an unlimited supply of these grenades that they can throw into every train car of people that they capture.
True.
So I felt like that was a slightly unlikely use of a
Mm.
grenade of any kind.
I will also point out that this episode, and specifically this scene, is what Bill basically stopped watching Walking Dead after this.
That
So,
scene or the next one?
the next one, the next
Yeah.
one.
The next one is a great scene. I love
Yeah.
this scene.
And it's also it has a little symmetry to the opening of season 7. So,
No.
um, but basically Rick and Glenn and Bob are all, and Daryl are all dragged into this, kind of like, factory area, and they're all put on their knees and, like, you know, sort of over this sink, and there's some red shirt there, which is what I'm going to call him. I don't know who that guy is. Um,
There's
but
the two red shirts, right?
yeah,
I
there's
mean,
two
yeah.
red shirts, and the Terminus folks, or the termites, do their sort of posturing and badass talking, and say they're gonna eat them, and they do this crazy thing where they knock out, or they brutally kill the two red shirts, and you
Who?
know the red shirts.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant the red by red shirts. I thought you meant the butchers.
Oh no, I mean the victims that we just don't really
Well, there's
know.
four. There's
Are
four
there four of
guys.
them?
Yeah, there's
Sorry.
four from A and four from B is what Garrett
Oh,
said.
okay.
And the first guy to go is actually someone from season 4. It's Sam, who
Yep.
was the guy with the girl who has the bum leg, who
Oh
disappeared.
yeah.
And he's also the guy's name. The actor is like Michael Lord Taylor or something like that. He plays the Penguin on Gotham. He's a
Robin
deep,
Lord Taylor.
yeah, thank you. And yeah, so there's a look of like recognition between Rick and him before he gets the baseball bat up the back of the head.
Yep.
It's just so brutal, this scene. And what I love about it is that actually the termites are completely like business-like about it.
Oh yeah,
They're
they're pretty
just
cold.
they're just like, all right, wait a second, I have to sharpen. He doesn't even say I have to sharpen my knife. He's just like, wait a second, and the guy with the baseball bat just practices his golf swings. There's no discussion.
Nope.
The prisoners are all freaking out, especially after they start cutting throats and just going down the line.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about it is how little dialogue there is actually until
Yep.
Gareth comes into the room. And then even his dialogue at first is very logistical and businesslike. It just really drives home the fact that they do this constantly, although there is a new guy, so they do explain
What they're doing,
a little bit of the process, which
so that we know what's going on.
I get. I mean, yeah, sure. I didn't really need to hear from him like, although it was cool to hear. He's like, okay, we have 2 hours to clean this up, and then we're gonna be open faced again, or whatever he called it, like ready to receive more idiots.
Yeah.
But this scene is just fantastic. I have a couple of problems with it, namely, it's something we should have been doing since our first podcast about The Walking Dead is counting how many times Glenn's life is put in jeopardy.
Oh my gosh, but it's so many times. I don't know.
I mean, it's twice just in this scene with a baseball
Right.
bat, and I'm like, all right, I have no more patience, especially now that especially now.
Uh huh. I thought it was kind of funny, actually, given
Sure. I mean,
you
it
know.
is. At this point, it's only going to be funny every time he like narrowly escapes death.
Right.
But I thought that this was. I just love this scene. It's so brutal. It's disgusting. It's terrible. But
It's really gross, and I mean, you see, um, you just it's almost like, and I like that you can see how this group is working, that they have a system in place,
yeah,
and the purpose of those flashbacks is to show that they were a little bit like Rick's group, and we see them both at the beginning and at the end of this. With
honestly, I
this,
think watching the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were.
no, I'm just saying, like, I felt like that point was one of my sort of, it bothered me a little bit about how, like, in your face that was. Like, I don't know that they needed to do it, but it just seemed like they were totally trying to be like, see, this is what could happen. And I don't know. It was just a little too much, hitting you over the head with it, I thought.
Haha, get it. Um,
Yeah.
one of the things I think that is affecting me watching it this season now is having watched the first 3 or 4 episodes of season 7.
Mm-hmm.
It, you're kind of like, okay, these are like the worst people that Rick is and his group have encountered so far, and Rick and his group are kind of like not peak, but they're definitely like about as badass as they ever get.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it's like there's a lot of comparison going on in my head, whether or not I'm trying to. Like I look at Rick giving someone the evil eyeball. How caught up are you now on 7, by the way?
Caught up enough that I know what you're saying.
Okay. So yeah, like the way
Like,
he looks
do
at
you,
people is definitely addressed in season 7, right?
yeah,
And he spends a lot of these first 3 episodes giving people that same eyeball.
yep.
So it's hard not to draw these like these parallels between how he's
Yep.
how he's getting across his message and how people are like reacting to him being a scary person.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like that's all I'm saying. It's just
No, I hear you.
it's weird to watch this season now given the events that we know about so far in season 7. That's all.
Right. We also have stuff going on outside of Terminus where we see Carol and Tyrese. They're still hanging out with Judith, following the tracks. They run into one of the termites, Martin, who we see later, and he's, you know, really one of the most annoying characters. I hate him from the beginning. He's just
Annoying.
annoying and disgusting and horrible and just
He,
like,
he does a great job of making you hate him.
yeah, no, he's perfect. I mean, I think he does a fantastic job. Like, he is just awful.
Yeah.
So, and then this is still the time when, you know, Tyrese is still a peacekeeper to an extent here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, I think Martin does a good job at basically identifying weaknesses and really just kind of finding those weak spots and kind of taking that knife and sort of turning that point in a bit.
I mean, he Martin is very much a. If I can continue to make comparisons to season 7, he's definitely like a Negan
Yeah.
crew type guy. He's got the savior attitude,
Mm-hmm.
except he's a little more nihilistic. He's like, "Why haven't you killed me yet?
Yep.
You should kill me, or you should run away." Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's just like a huge level of I just don't even care. I don't give a fuck. I don't want to do this today. I don't want to kill you and a baby today. Even like goes that far.
Mm-hmm.
If I can though, quickly backtrack to one other thing that bothered me about the butcher shop scene,
Uh-huh.
where Gareth comes in and then he's like, "Oh, I could have come in 30 seconds later and this whole process would be over and I would have missed my opportunity to ask this question." But he walks in and he goes up to Rick and he's like, "Hey, you buried a bag. We watched you bury a bag in the woods. What was in the bag? Where is it?" And when Rick is not forthcoming with the information, he threatens Bob with a knife. And I'm like, you're threatening to kill a guy who is in line to get killed in a matter of
Right.
seconds.
So how is this a bargaining chip?
I mean,
That's
maybe that's
true.
why Rick still didn't say anything, but it was just laughable to me. I was like, okay, are you adding tension to this? Because I don't, other than underlining the fact that Gareth is a cool cat and doesn't have a problem with putting a knife up to people's faces while he's talking about like, how many rounds did you shoot and make sure you clean up, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. It was just like a weird thing. But as you were saying, a little further on in the show, we've got Carol and Tyrese have rolled up Martin, and they've taken control of this shack, and we find out that Martin is like putting out fireworks to distract the zombies away from the base after the firefight.
Yep.
Carol and Tyrese have also seen a zombie mob heading towards Terminus, though, so they kind of know that that's happening. And once they hear Martin talking trash about Michonne and Carl, the kid with the hat and the samurai, the chick with the sword, and how he's gonna drain their blood, like the gig was up.
Mm-hmm.
He totally got busted talking about that on his little walkie-talkie.
Right. And Carol's just pretty much like not taking any shit from anybody at this point. I mean, she's just like, okay, we got to get our people out. And she's just like, does the whole gut covering thing that we've seen in the past, and she's scouting out what's going to happen, and she wants to see. I thought at first she was just doing more of a reconnaissance, but no, she's doing a full-on one-person commando rescue mission.
This is basically the scene that cements her in what was the Walking Dead pantheon as like the baddest ass chick on the show. You
Yeah,
know,
so she's just kind of like scanning stuff out, and then she's like, you know what? There's a pretty big horde here, and you know, the guards are kind of already getting nervous. So she's like, all right, I'm just gonna like have perfect aim and ignite this propane tank and
it took
cause
her
a
it could took her a couple shots, but yeah,
But still,
the
I
perfect
mean,
aim was with the firework for sure. Something
yeah,
that doesn't shoot straight. Like the thing about her character though is last season. Like okay, let's go back in time. Season one, she's like a timid, abused wife, and season two, she's a heartbroken mother. Season three, she's teaching kids how to
kids had
use
to kill,
knives.
and yeah,
Season four,
she's taking care of the group and getting rid of people, which is how she got banished in the first place
right?
because she
And
killed
now,
off.
so she there has been a progression, but this is definitely
Oh yeah,
like you
now
said,
she's like Rambo.
this is some commando stuff, and so yeah, she there's a fairly unlikely scene with her shooting a firework into a leaking propane tank. But you know what? I'm willing to forgive that. It's kind of fun to watch the people in Terminus running away from zombies. Not sure why they feel like they have to run away from them when there's a fence in between them and the zombies, but they do it anyway. I don't know. Like it's hard to tell how many people there are in Terminus. Is another
Right.
thing. How many of them are there? But I guess it doesn't really matter because they get their asses kicked. One guy, another kind of laughable scene is the dude crawling away on his back from a zombie and getting his face eaten.
Yeah, that's kind of silly.
Anytime I see people running away with their guns, running away from zombies with their guns, I'm like, why? How
Well,
have
it
you not
was
trained for this?
Well, it's the same thing that we were talking about with Fear the Walking Dead the last season
Yeah,
when they
exactly.
go into the little compound and it's just like, guys, you have guns and there's not that many of them and you could actually walk up into those towers and just take care of business, but you
Yeah,
don't do that. Like it's weird.
or set up a firing line
Yeah.
and just take your time. Um, which also bothers me later on when you see them like killing a bunch of zombies and like gaining back terrain. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. Um, so Butcher
So yeah,
House.
but Butcher
Back.
House is all you know. So Carol's heroics have basically saved everybody in the butchery, because the loud bang distracts them long enough that Rick's group gains the upper hand in fantastic fashion.
Gareth has run off to find out what's going on, and Rick has managed to kill two people with a piece of wood by
Yeah,
stabbing them. We also get to see that the person that they were butchering before the prisoners came into the room was none other than Alex, who is
yeah,
Gareth's brother. So they were planning on eating him,
Ugh.
which is hardcore and reminds me of the movie Alive.
Yeah. And then as the group is sort of running around Terminus, you see just the evidence of their butchery.
Oh man, yeah,
And it's
the
pretty
next
gross. It's pretty disgusting and just
yeah,
awful.
yeah, it's not good.
Nope.
So
Just
now
like
there's more.
basically the meat lockers and all that
Yeah,
crazy stuff.
oh, it's bad. I mean, it could be worse. It's actually almost clinical. It's just like this is kind of what a slaughterhouse looks like with cows, except that's a human torso.
Yep.
Yeah, in the box car, there's some. We have to keep remembering that a lot of these people haven't really met. Like they kind of got thrown together in the box car, like Rosita and Abraham and Eugene are
Mm-hmm.
brand new. Tara is kind of new to the group at this point. So there's a lot of like back and forth that we're not used to, I think, which is
Right.
good. Like they didn't in the script. I mean, Gimple has a real handle on who knows who, what relationships they have, and so there's
And they're acting accordingly. I
yeah, they
mean,
definitely are. And Carl is has to make a speech like, "Hey, don't worry, guys, my dad is definitely coming back. He's gonna save the day." And Eugene has to deliver some spiel about how he knows how to fix the world,
right.
which is kind of like, all right, sure, whatever, pathogen, blah blah. Crazy man with face tats. That's the guy that they find in the box car in like a container after Rick and
Mm-hmm.
the Rick and Glenn and Daryl and Bob escape from the butcher shop. They release a guy who also on in hindsight almost looks like a wolf
Yep.
with the crazy face tats and the insanity that he's got going on, but I don't think he was even supposed to be one.
Yep.
And we don't find out who he is
Until
until
the very end.
the very end. And I don't know why they would do it that way, but I guess I mean it works in a way. It just takes a long time for you to figure like to dot the I and cross the T and be like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
that's why he was there and that's why he was so nutty. But at the time, you're just kind of like, oh, that was a strange interaction. I don't know what to do with that.
Right.
Carol has been walking around inside the compound by herself and is finding all their gear. There's a lot of stuffed animals in this one room that makes you really uncomfortable about where all
Yeah,
this.
just a lot of personal items. I mean, I don't think that it was a mistake that this looks a lot like the concentration camps photos that you see
Hmm.
with all the belongings piled up or, put into like these ditches or whatever. Like, I don't think that that was a mistake that I think they did this very much on purpose to
Yeah.
show, to basically show with the things left behind what they had been doing to everybody coming in.
So she grabs the crossbow, her husband's watch that she'd given to Rick. A
Daryl's
couple of
Daryl's crossbow.
who did I say his crossbow?
It's both. I think hers was there too, or something. There's like,
She already has the sniper rifle and she grabs some other stuff.
yeah,
The next scene is one that I do have a problem with. Rick and his group are like kind of cornered. There's a big shootout happening. Zombies are getting shot, and they're like, "How are we gonna get out of this situation?" And then Rick manages to get in behind this group of people, and
yep,
this group of people are everything that's wrong. There's five or six of them. They all have AK-47s. They're all walking and shooting from the hip
uh
on
huh,
full auto. They're not just doing one thing wrong. They're doing
everything wrong.
four things wrong. And apparently they're still getting headshots while they're doing this. It's absurd.
Yep.
And I was embarrassed for the show. The funny thing is that Rick like he sneaks in behind this guy who's like trailing behind them, but who is also walking and shooting from the hip. Like
Right.
he's walking behind his friends, shooting from like he's
Like
gonna
he would
shoot his
have.
friends.
Yeah. No. He was. To me, I'm just like, why aren't some of these people? I thought that maybe. I don't know. I was like, maybe that's what they're going for. I just couldn't figure it out, and
It's just
it was
bad.
really stupid.
It's just bad. Like whoever their shooting guy is was giving them bad advice or just was like, "Oh, fine, I can't fight you on this walking and shooting from the hip crap anymore." So Rick grabs the guy's gun, stabs and kills him, picks up the gun. He does give them a quick lesson on how to shoot down the sights of
Right.
a rifle and not walking, but he is still on full auto.
Yep.
But I guess that's just the most expeditious. All he wants to do is, you know, because he puts them down and they get eaten by zombies, and it's pretty fun to watch.
Yeah. And then Tasha Yar gets her comeuppance, a la Carol, where basically she's begging her for mercy and trying to explain to her why they did this and asking, basically asking for forgiveness. And Carol's just like, yeah, no, I don't think so. Takes her
Why would
down.
Tasha Yar like walk into the middle of the big room and say, "Turn around, I want to see your face," instead of just shooting her in the back?
Yeah, I know. Of course she would have shot her. It was sort of stupid.
But we did get to
Um,
see like a middle-aged lady fight as a result of this interaction, which is always fun.
Yeah, and we knew she wasn't going to get any mercy from Carol. Definitely not. Not after she picked up the crossbow and the watch. That
Carol's
just wasn't.
one-liner though is pretty badass. You're not here, neither am I.
Yep.
Yeah, that was good. If you're the butcher or you're the cattle, kind of becomes the motto of which is the
Mm-hmm.
motto, I guess, of the termites because Gareth says it also in the at the end of the episode.
Right.
Um, things go bad at the shack with Tyrese and Martin and Judith. I mean, we kind of had an inkling that things were going to go bad because, frankly, Tyrese is not in any position to handle his business.
Yeah. No. I mean, we've been seeing this. We've been seeing this all along. So this is just sort of it coming to a head. And basically, Martin's just talking up a storm, and as I said, just kind of needling him and needling him. And he's doing it as a distraction. And then he grabs the baby Judith and tells Tyrese he needs to go outside the cabin where all the walkers are kind of hanging out, or he's gonna kill the baby. And like Tyrese backs up and goes out there and basically destroys all the walkers.
Honestly, when Martin was like, go outside, I was like, part of me is like, that's probably a good idea with anybody except Tyrese, because he's done this a few
Yeah.
times where he has been in a room with,
He just goes berserk.
that's kind of his signature move, is going
Yeah.
somewhere with a bunch of zombies and coming out alive.
Yeah.
Sorry. Sorry,
Yep.
Martin.
Sorry, Martin, you're losing on this one. So yeah, that happens, and it's I feel like this is they just keep overdoing it. It's just like, okay, we get it, we get what you're doing with this character. Now let's see what happens. Like, let's
With
see.
Tyrese.
Yeah, like I'm just sort of like, please.
Well, it's annoying, watching this whole 3 episode arc. Yeah, his decisions obviously have ramifications that they go badly for the group.
Right.
We see him beating the heck out of Martin on the floor. We don't see how that ends. Back at Terminus, the gang gets rescued from the boxcar. There's a pretty cool scene of all of them running through this crowd of walkers, having these heroic, face cutting, head chopping,
Time.
teamwork moves. Rick shoots Gareth in the shoulder, so we know he's not done. And then they all just climb out of the compound on the fence and go into the woods, where there's an interesting conversation.
Right. So Rick, of course, is immediately going to his weapons store, and then reunites with Carol. Right as he's planning to go back in and take care of the rest of the termites. And, keep in mind that he banished Carol. He banished Carol for some for behavior at the prison. And suddenly it's like, yeah, you did all this? And he seems pretty psyched about it. And it's a great warm and fuzzy reunion. But I'll admit to you, it does bother me a little bit because he banished her. I don't know. So
I feel like they actually do a decent job on this show of handling this situation, especially in the next episode. But or is
okay.
it? I forget when it is. But yeah, he goes to her and he's like, "I kicked you out. I sent you out here, and then you had to save our asses.
Yeah,
And we're out here,
no,
and
you're
now
right.
we're out here with you. Will you accept us? Well, can we still hang out? Are we still cool?"
Right. It's just in this particular instance, I was like, all right, that's pretty quick. I did like the Carol and Daryl reunion. That was awesome.
That's good. But also this conversation where Rick is saying, "All right, they don't get to live. We're going back in. We're going to kill every last one of them." And then he gets a lot of pushback from Maggie, from Abraham. I think even one or two other people are like, "No, let's not do that. We only just got out of there." But again,
And his instinct was right.
in hindsight, you're like, okay, actually, no, yeah, you should have done it. And then not just because of this season, but also because again of season 7.
Right.
Like always, always, always tie up your loose ends.
Well, and especially when your loose ends are vengeful, cannibal people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's not as if these aren't the misguided denizens that we have seen under the governor's rule. You know what I mean? Like these people were doing you harm, had no problem doing it, have the wherewithal to survive. Like you don't leave these guys out there. So,
However, there is some realism in the opposition, because there are how many people in this group? I
True.
can't even count them all. 10, 12?
yep. That's true.
We find out later that there's 5 Terminus people who've survived. The odds are they would not have come after this group.
Probably
The odds
not.
are they would have run away.
You're probably right. And I think that they do address that these next couple episodes where it just was kind of luck that they came across them though.
It does say that. True.
Because they're just like, it could have been anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's of course the warm and fuzzy reunion with Rick and Judith and Carl.
Yeah.
and that's all great. And then we also get to see Morgan hanging out on the tracks.
Yeah, the after the credits scene, which I don't know if they've ever done those on the
Yeah,
show other than this one.
yeah, and that's kind of cool. And then we do the final flashback where we see the termites again, the flashback, and we see the tattooed faced man who basically was raping people. Um, so that's why he was in the cart. But so a lot of events, but I felt like overall this was a super powerful episode. It got a lot of flack because people felt like this was pretty over the top and bloody and horrible.
Well, it also had the highest ever audience. It's
Yeah.
17.29 million viewers.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you throw the net that wide, you're gonna you're gonna offend some people
Mm-hmm.
for sure. So I don't know. This was really a solid start to the season, and that just made the next two episodes all the worse.
All the more disappointing. Which let's hop into it. Um,
Number two
yeah.
was called Strangers, and it was directed by David Boyd and written by Robert the Bob Kirkman.
Mm.
It still had 15.14 million viewers when it premiered in October 2014. Gosh, that's a long time ago. But this episode is just a whole bunch of feelings and talking.
Feelings and talking, not really getting anywhere with anything, and just to me, just a lot of just wringing of hands and just stupid crap. It just seemed to me very, very pointless. And they kind of eventually get to the point in the next episode, which is episode 3. But to me, these, especially after you start off the season with an episode like No Sanctuary, episodes 2 and 3 just to me fell so flat and really just very tropey and stupid. So, you know, and I feel like we go over some of the same ground that we have before. So, here we've got the group finds this church and runs into Father Gabriel Stokes. And, there's all this mystery about what he is, why he's just kind of like alone in the woods, and he brings them to his church, and they're all like, they're kind of regrouping. They're also kind of getting to know each other. But there's also the whole thing where Rick immediately is asking, okay, how many people have you killed? And he wants to know who this person is immediately. Um,
This is
and
one of those scenes where he's just giving him the stare.
yeah,
That's very
yeah,
noticeable.
yeah. And, it's all this weird stuff where I also feel like it doesn't go down that way, but there's all this sorts of stuff with Father Gabriel where he seems untrustworthy, he seems erratic, yet they're trusting him to lead him to like a food bank and to do all this stuff where they just got through sort of walking into the lion's den with the termites. I just don't feel like it's realistic to believe that they would just go in and do this, even if they were doing it somewhat cautiously. I just don't feel like they would be trusting him no matter who he is.
Yeah.
Like
Why
they
wouldn't they
just
just do it on their own? Yeah.
right without him. So there's all this stuff where like I just I think some of it is helpful because you get to see the group talking to each other. We get to hear a little bit more about Eugene and the plan to go to DC to work on curing the outbreak. And you hear a little bit of why they're going to DC because they're supposedly in infrastructure and stuff like that. But there's this other stuff. It just feels like a lot of wasted time and weird wasted scenes. And then,
Gabriel to me still he's from the books, but I really feel like he's an unnecessary character for this
I don't
story.
know why they decided to bring him in at this point and for this purpose. Like, he was in the books quite a bit, but this is just weird. And
But even in the books, I don't feel like he plays much of a
no,
part. And
no.
I love
And
this actor from The Wire. I have no
yeah,
idea
he's
what his name
great.
is, but he's great. It's like having him, Lawrence Gilliard Jr. and the dude's name who plays Tyrese is all on in one cast again
I know,
is
it's kind of
wonderful.
awesome.
But
The Wire
unfortunately, the
reunited.
Wire parts of it anyway. It's just so unnecessary. This guy he brings very little to the table. His drama, his dramatic tension is kind of okay. Sure, yeah, he's not great, but is it just to show us that not all bad guys are really that bad, or that everybody's broken, or I'm not sure. Like, and now we have to have some kind of I've lost my faith and am I going to get it back thing, and I don't really care about that, frankly.
No, and I don't really care about him. And even like, so he brings to the food bank. You see sort of like the members of his church who are all like kind of dripping. It is a pretty disgusting. Like, this is the other thing. I there. So the group goes to this food bank. The ceiling's kind of caved in. All the food is in the basement for some reason. And there's all this water down there. And in the water, there's like a ton of walkers. And yet they're going to go down in there without knowing, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're going to go down there blind without knowing what's there in the water, knowing that walkers just can kind of like hang out.
Yeah, no, I don't understand why they would
This
do it.
plan is really stupid. and
It's
and
it's a
even
great way to get Bob bitten by a zombie,
and
however.
which is exactly what happens. And just part of me while watching this was just like, well, duh. Like,
Well,
what are you, this is just so pointless. And I again do not believe that this group, first of all, would have followed the Father Gabriel there. I don't think they would have bothered. I think they would have figured out how to get the food up, but they certainly wouldn't have done it in the way that they did. And it just is, to me, just really silly. And whoever, like, it really shocked me that Kirkman wrote this. So,
it was clear though that Bob was going to die because he was also at the beginning of this episode playing
oh,
this game with Sasha about
oh,
like
I know.
what's the best way to interpret things.
Oh, and they're
And
all
so
kissing and smiling at each other, and I'm just
yeah,
like, yeah, he's gonna bite it soon.
that's the end of Bob.
That's the end of Bob right now. The minute they started playing that game, I'm like, he's done.
Once he stopped being a tortured alcoholic and became like this positive force of positivity, it was all over.
Yeah.
So I feel like that's kind of the whole episode.
Yeah, pretty much. The other key piece
Well,
is that
the ending is obviously huge, and
right.
there's also the Abraham and Rick going becoming at odds because
Yeah.
Abraham decides that there is a clear and present threat to Eugene. I kind of understand his reasoning here. He's like, I want to continue on my mission to Washington
Yep.
D.C. And some of you have said you wanted to come with me, but it's going to happen right now
Right.
because we've Carol and Daryl are in the wind. They've run off after a car with a white cross in the window to finish up the Beth plot
Storyline.
line there. And Bob has been absconded with from the church graveyard after the audience clearly knows that based on some looks that he's been giving things that he is
Been bitten.
not long for this world. And so based on just those disappearances and the fact that Sasha thinks she saw someone, the Abraham is like, I'm out of here. And Rick's like, you're not taking the truck. And they almost actually start
Right.
fighting. And
Right.
it's kind of manufactured drama that we don't really
Right.
need. That was another problem with this episode and the next one. And another issue that I have with all three of these is that uh, Daryl Daryl thinks he hears something in the woods one night and gets up and goes to look. And we know that Daryl is like this very accomplished woodsman, a hunter for his entire life.
Yeah.
And he's like, there's nothing there. And
Which
then,
is
but
BS. You
we
know that.
see, as the audience, we see a person moving without making any noise
Yeah.
through the woods, like 10 feet away from Daryl and Carol
Yeah.
in pitch black. So not only have the five termites survived, apparently one of them is literally like a werewolf or something that could,
Yeah.
like supernatural that can move without making any noise in the woods. Or you can only ever catch like a glimpse of him even with night vision goggles. Well, he apparently doesn't have night vision. He's just that good. And so that's in looking back at this with a critical eye, I found that to be annoying.
It was super annoying. It's like either you make Daryl the tracker that you keep saying he is, or you don't. And they just, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, come on. No, but I agree. I don't think we need to say more about that episode. And then wrapping up
Well,
this.
the very end of
Oh.
this episode is it recreates a scene from the books.
Yes.
Dale's.
Dale was the original
Hey,
character. In
remember
this.
Dale from season 2 when he got eaten? This is actually how Dale dies in the books, which is
Right.
he's been bitten and he gets absconded with by cannibals, and then he has the whole tainted meat laughing scene,
Yeah.
which we get to see.
Yeah.
No, we don't get to see that in this episode. That's the next one.
That's the next one. But we do see that they've cut his leg off.
We do get to see that they have Gareth's speech is really good, and it starts in this episode and continues in the next one. And honestly, Gareth is a pretty good villain. He has some. It's a good. He's got enough charisma and he's just enough of a cool character, but not too cool. I don't know. I really enjoyed his speech at the end of this episode and how it continued into the next one.
Right. And he's super creepy, and so basically, he's basically telling Bob, oh, yeah, we would have done this to you, but really it isn't personal. We would do this to anybody that we ran across. This is what we do now to survive, and we have to hunt. Because, for whatever reason, it's easier for this group to hunt humans than to hunt game, even though it seems like Daryl keeps finding game all over the place.
And they have this amazing wood person who can move silently through the
Yeah,
forest.
yeah. I mean, but yeah, we're gonna go for humans. And then the big reveal is that Bob looks down and his leg's gone, and they're all eating the flesh, which is disgusting. And okay, can I also just point out, and this maybe is just an aesthetic thing. But do you really think if these people are like cooking human meat, they're just gonna like put a foot on there? Like, like I mean, I know they do it for effect to show that it's Bob's foot, but but are they really just gonna be like roasting just a foot
Hey,
on a
pig's hooves,
grate? I don't
you know,
know. But then that flips into the next episode, which is Four Walls and a Roof.
they use the whole animal. HA. It's a very respectful approach to cooking. But yeah.
But yeah. So
So does
anyway,
it? I think it picks right back up. They're at the school. He's like, "This is dangerous. We shouldn't be here." There's like a bunch of zombies in the school, and they have the long conversation. He has the long speech at Bob, and then Bob starts his laughing. The reactions of the cannibals to find out that he's been bitten is great. Actually, one
yeah,
of them
they're all
throws
like
up,
puking up the Bob meat.
and I have to wonder if that's why they actually returned him to the church later. If that had been their original plan, maybe it was to
I
try
don't
and
know. I feel like
to,
they just would have killed him, but they didn't do that.
yeah.
And you know, we've got then we've got the long tortured story of Father Gabriel continuing, where he tells everybody what happened, which is unsurprisingly, he was a little chicken and didn't let his congregation in, and they got torn apart by the walkers.
Right
So,
outside the door.
yep. So that's his big bad secret,
Oh my goodness. How interesting.
and he hand wrings throughout the rest of this episode.
Throughout the rest of this show.
Yes. And then you've got the group once they see what's happened to Bob, which is it's horrific, and it's horrific for this group. It's hard for Sasha. He lets them know he's been bitten, and then so there's a lot of that going on because it's like, and he's got no leg, like it's not a good time for Bob.
They have this really awkward scene where everybody in the entire church comes to say goodbye to him
It's
because
pretty
like
rough.
it's pretty damn rough. But I guess hey, if you know the writing's on the wall,
Right.
why not have like an official goodbye?
Yeah.
There's a great scene in this episode where the termites get completely slaughtered.
Well, right.
I feel like that's the saving grace of this episode.
Right, but again, there's a lot of like, Rick they're planning and they're going to go off and go after them, and it's like, well, where are you going to go and get them? And you think they're actually just going to still be there after they drop Bob off, and admittedly,
That's the trick, right? Like they're
well,
not telling us their plan.
admittedly, when this all happened, I'm like, really, guys, really, you're gonna go to that school, and then they're just gonna come in and take care of you. And I felt like, but even with this scene, the termites like wait for, again, super silent. They wait for Rick's group to go away for like a second, and then they go into the church, and they're all knowing because they've been watching them, and they even know that what Judas' name is because of Martin, and just this really long drawn out scene where it's like, come in or come out, or we're gonna come in and get you. You know what I mean? Like it's just this really long, stupid scene before finally Rick's group comes back and starts like kicking their asses. And there is this moment because it's pretty brutal in how they do it.
It's very brutal. It's
but
great.
and Maggie's face and other people's faces. But again, it's like, look what they just did to Bob. Look what they did at Terminus. Yeah, this is brutal, but I don't know what choice you have. So
You gotta wonder, Gareth's last thoughts are, wow, we tried to get these people twice and we've gotten our
I
asses
know,
kicked. Maybe we should have not tried this again.
right?
Uh, yeah, and obviously you're supposed to think this is bad. They are acting out of, rage and vengeance, and you're not supposed to do this, especially not in a church.
Yeah.
And that's certainly what Maggie's face and Glenn's face are telling us. And then Father Gabriel's reaction is kind of comical.
Yeah, he's like,
Uh,
"This is the Lord's house," and Maggie's like, "Yeah, no, this is just for
she
for
gets to say the title of
the
the episode.
title. These are just four walls and a roof." And yeah, so I mean, it's somewhat satisfying because finally the termites are gone.
Hmm.
But again, it's just this weird thing, and then there's the whole long goodbye with Bob, where he's like, "No, Rick, sit with the baby here next to me." It's like, yeah, I don't think I'm bringing the baby anywhere near you, man. I don't know that I do that. And then the whole interesting exchange between Tyrese and Sasha, where Tyrese, she basically says, "You gotta like, if Bob dies, we've got to take care of him. That's what we do." And Tyrese is like, "I can't do that," and then he ends up taking care of it so that she doesn't have to. And then we've also got there's again more tension, a little bit more tension with the group with Abraham and Eugene going on to Washington.
Why? Why do they go? Here's the
It's
thing.
strange. I don't get it,
I
right?
got
Okay,
it in
this is what.
episode two. I got it in episode two when
Yes.
Abraham's like, there is a clear threat to Eugene and my
Right.
mission. I have to take him to DC now. And we're going to make this deal where I say I'm going to stay till noon tomorrow and then we're all going. But then noon tomorrow comes, guess what? Everybody's dead who was a threat to them.
Right. So
So
why are you
why does he still
immediately
feel like
running
he has
off?
to go?
It's kind
He
of
could
weird,
he could
right?
wait, who knows how long. Apparently it's just that evening is when Daryl shows up. It's just it feels very artificial again, manufactured like, hey, we just got the entire ensemble together literally this like yesterday.
Yeah.
No Sanctuary is the first time the whole cast is together after all of season 4. And now we're just going to split them up again because actually no, Beth I guess has been missing.
Right.
But we're just going to split them up again because we hate the audience and we hate to have all these people on screen at once. But then you know what? I watched like the celebratory scene in the church with all the food and the wine in episode 2, and I'm like, ugh, I can't handle all these people together. They're too happy.
Yeah, well, you knew that was just going to be very, very short lived. The minute wine gets broken out and they all seem somewhat happy and giggling,
And when Rick
you
is holding a
know,
baby and is like, "Oh, I think I know what you're gonna say,"
yeah.
yeah, he's just a little too giddy.
So, yeah, so kind of a letdown, these two episodes 2 and 3 after No Sanctuary. And we'll keep moving on into the season. I'm glad we're doing them three at the time, three at a shot, just because I think we're gonna have to to get this to keep this at a minimum. What do you think?
Yeah, we'll do what we need to do. We also should mention that Daryl does show up at the very end of the episode.
Oh yeah, but not with Carol, so you know that that's gonna be something.
That's a thing. But yeah, it's boy, we'll see. Will our intrepid gang of heroes ever reunite?
I know. But if you're enjoying this stroll down memory lane with Walking Dead, drop us a line at reanimated podcast.com, the website, or you could do an email, reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or send us a tweet, we're reanimated pcast on the tweets, on the
That's right.
Twitters. But I am, it was cool seeing Sanctuary again, but again, I was disappointed and things bothered me about these two episodes even more so than the first time I watched them. So I would love to hear what other people have to say about it.
Indeed. So yeah, join us again next time when we go through episodes 4 through 6 of season 5 of The Walking Dead, and we'll see you then.
Excellent, and have a happy TG.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Bye.